Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be here, but life has a way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expect it. I'm Mike, 42, and I guess I'm looking for advice or maybe just a place to vent. So here goes. About 15 years ago, my wife Daisy and I were what people would call high school sweethearts turned lifelong partners. Or at least that's what I thought we were. I was head over heels in love with her, ready to spend the rest of my life building a family and growing old together. Turns out she had other plans. When she cheated on me with this guy Bruce, a flashy coworker of hers, it crushed me. She didn't just cheat, she left me for him. To make it worse, she seemed to blame me for it. "You're too boring, Mike. You don't have ambition," she'd said, like I wasn't enough as I was. I remember standing there in our little kitchen, staring at her as she packed her bags, Bruce waiting in his car outside like some knight in a shiny SUV. It was humiliating. After she left, I hit rock bottom. The divorce was messy, even though we didn't have kids. She wanted everything: the house, the savings, the car. Her lawyer spun some sob story about how she gave up her career dreams for me, which wasn't even true. She was already working full-time when we got married. I didn't fight back much though. I just wanted her gone. Fast forward a decade. I rebuilt my life. I got into woodworking, started my own small business, and learned how to enjoy my own company. Dating was a non-starter. I couldn't trust anyone again. Daisy, meanwhile, married Bruce. I'd hear bits and pieces about them from mutual friends, like how they had a big, flashy wedding and took vacations to Europe. Honestly, I tried not to care, but yeah, it stung. Then, out of nowhere, Daisy shows up at my door last week. It was like seeing a ghost. She looked different, older, thinner, tired, but still had that same way of holding herself, like the world owed her something. I didn't even have time to ask what she was doing there before she burst into tears and started talking. Turns out, her perfect life with Bruce wasn't so perfect after all. He'd left her a few months ago, taking most of their money with him. Now she's broke, jobless, and to top it all off, has late-stage cervical cancer. She says she doesn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face and tell her to figure it out like I had to when she left me. But then I thought about my mom. She's always been a big believer in forgiveness, and I could practically hear her voice in my head saying, "Mike, be the bigger person." So, against my better judgment, I let her in. And that's where things started getting messy. So Daisy's sitting on my couch looking small and frail, which is weird because this is the same woman who used to walk into a room and make everyone pay attention. She's crying, talking about how Bruce abandoned her when she got sick, how she's been couch surfing with old friends who've now stopped answering her calls. I stood there awkwardly, arms crossed, not sure what to say. Finally, I asked her the obvious question, "Why are you here, Daisy? After everything you put me through?" She wiped her face with a tissue and gave me this look, like a mix of guilt and entitlement. "You were the only person I could think of who might still care about me." That one stung. Still care about her? After she tore my life apart, and left me to pick up the pieces while she rode off into the sunset with Bruce? Yeah, right. But then she hit me with the next bombshell. "Mike, I regret everything I did to you. I made a huge mistake leaving you," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve your help, but I need it. Please." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing it in the mirror before she came over. Still, I couldn't just throw her out in the cold. I told her she could stay in the guest room for a couple of nights while she figured things out. The next day, I called my mom to tell her what was going on. I half expected her to tell me I was an idiot for letting Daisy back into my life, but nope. Mom did what mom always does, told me to be kind, to show grace. "She's sick, Mike. Maybe this is your chance to finally get closure." Closure. Right. But here's where things started to get weird. That evening, Daisy came downstairs while I was making dinner. She thanked me for letting her stay, then started talking about Bruce. And let me tell you, the story didn't add up. First, she said Bruce left her because she got sick. Then, she slipped up and mentioned that they were having money problems even before her diagnosis. I pressed her on it. Something didn't feel right. "Well, Bruce was never good with money," she admitted, avoiding my eyes. "He made some bad investments and we ended up losing a lot. But he was the one who left me. I swear. I didn't push it further at the time, but my gut told me she wasn't giving me the whole story. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone. She was in the guest room, and her voice was low, almost whispering, but I caught bits and pieces. "No, I haven't told him yet," she said. "I need more time. He'll understand once I explain everything." Who was she talking to? What hadn't she told me? I felt like I was back in the bad old days, second-guessing everything she said, waiting for the next shoe to drop. The next morning, I asked her about the phone call. She looked startled, then defensive. "It was just an old friend," she said quickly. "Someone from work." I didn't believe her. Something wasn't adding up, and I had a feeling I was about to find out what it was, whether I wanted to or not. The uneasy feeling didn't go away. Daisy was acting weird, too quiet when I was around, but I'd catch her pacing in the guest room like she was rehearsing a speech. I tried to focus on work and give her space, but it was like waiting for a ticking time bomb. Then 2 days later it finally went off. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Daisy walked in, holding her phone and looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. She set the phone on the counter and cleared her throat. "Mike, there's something I need to tell you." Here we go, I thought. She took a deep breath and said, "I didn't come here just because I'm sick. There's more to it." I put my mug down and crossed my arms. "More like what?" She fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. "Bruce didn't just leave me because of the cancer or the money problems. He found out about something from my past." I stared at her, waiting for her to spit it out. She avoided my eyes and kept rambling. "It wasn't like I meant for it to happen. It was a mistake, a stupid one-time thing. But when Bruce found out, he couldn't handle it. That's when he left." It clicked before she even said the words. "You cheated on him," I said flatly. Her head snapped up and she looked offended, like I'd accused her of something unthinkable. "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice rising. "It happened years ago and it didn't mean anything." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, humorless laugh. "Wow, Daisy. You've really got a talent for this, don't you?" She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to realize she wasn't going to win. Instead, she flipped the script. "I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd judge me. You don't understand what I've been through with Bruce. He's not the man you think he is." "Oh, I'm sure he's not," I shot back. "But let's not pretend you're innocent here. You cheated on me, you cheated on him. What, did you think I'd throw you a pity party?" Her face crumpled like she was about to cry, but I wasn't buying it. I grabbed my coffee and left her standing there, trying to make herself the victim. Later that day I got a call from my mom. Apparently, Daisy had reached out to her, probably hoping for some moral support. Mom, of course, urged me to be patient and give Daisy a chance to explain herself. "She's going through so much, Mike. Maybe she just needs someone to believe in her." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like Daisy was just playing the same game she always played, twisting the truth to suit her needs. And then came the next curveball. That evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a screenshot of an email thread between Daisy and Bruce. The messages were explosive. In one, Bruce accused her of lying about the timeline of her affair. In another, he mentioned something about a loan she took out in his name without telling him. And then the kicker: "You ruined my life, Daisy. Don't even think about crawling back to me when you burn your bridge with Mike. He's too smart to fall for your act." I stared at the screen, my stomach sinking. This wasn't just about her cheating. This was something bigger, messier. And I had a feeling I'd only scratched the surface. That screenshot rattled me more than I expected. I couldn't figure out who sent it or why, but one thing was clear: Daisy's story was full of holes. I went back into the living room, where she was curled up on the couch with a blanket, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. For a moment I just stood there watching her. How could someone look so at ease while their entire life was in shambles? Finally, I broke the silence. "Daisy, who else knows you're here?" She glanced up, looking confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is there anyone else you've been in contact with? Because I just got a message that makes it sound like I'm not the only person you've been spinning your stories to." Her face paled. What message? I held up my phone and read the text out loud, watching her reaction carefully. She didn't deny it right away, which told me everything I needed to know. I don't know who would send that, she said finally, but her voice was shaky. Bruce must have sent it to mess with you. Really? I said, raising an eyebrow. Because it sounds more like you've got skeletons in your closet that are starting to rattle. She stood up, the blankets sliding to the floor. Mike, I told you the truth. Bruce is the one lying. He's just trying to turn you against me because he's bitter that I left him. I couldn't help but laugh. You left him? That's funny because the way I remember it, you were the one crying on my doorstep saying he abandoned you. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. She was caught and she knew it. That's when she tried a different tactic, tears. Big, dramatic ones, the kind that used to work on me back when I still thought she was capable of being honest. I don't know what you want from me, Mike. I came here because I thought you'd understand, but all you've done is judge me. I'm sick, for God's sake. Doesn't that mean anything to you? There it was, the guilt trip. I didn't even respond. I just grabbed my jacket and left the house, needing some air before I said something I'd regret. I drove around aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my head. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Daisy hadn't changed. She was still the same manipulative, self-centered person she was all those years ago. And now she was dragging me into her mess again. When I got home, she was still on the couch, but this time she looked less defiant and more scared. Mike, she said softly as I walked in. I know I haven't been completely honest with you, but I swear, everything I've done was because I didn't have a choice. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. Bruce and I got into some financial trouble a few years ago, she admitted. I was desperate, so I borrowed some money under his name. I thought I'd be able to pay it back before he noticed, but things spiraled out of control. And the affair? I asked coldly. She hesitated. It wasn't really an affair, she said finally. It was just one mistake. I thought I could fix everything by keeping it a secret, but Bruce found out and used it against me. Her words felt rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for the right moment to drop this bomb. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. This one was a single sentence. Ask her why she really came back to you. I looked up at Daisy, who was watching me nervously. I wasn't sure what the truth was anymore, but I knew one thing. I was done playing her games. The message hit me like a gut punch. Ask her why she really came back to you. I looked at Daisy, who was sitting there clutching the edge of the couch cushion, her knuckles white. She must have noticed my expression because she suddenly got defensive. What now, Mike? She asked, her voice sharp, the tears from earlier already forgotten. I held up my phone. You want to explain this? Because someone clearly thinks I'm not asking the right questions. She blinked rapidly, then shook her head. I don't know who's sending you those messages, but it's not me. That's not what I asked, I said, my voice cold. Why are you here, Daisy? And don't give me the sob story about Bruce and cancer. What are you really after? Her face flushed, and for a second I thought she was going to explode. But then she did something unexpected. She went completely quiet. She stared at her lap, biting her lip like she was trying to figure out what to say. Finally she looked up and said, I didn't know where else to go. I thought maybe I could count on you to help me. Help you with what? I demanded. Her eyes darted away again. The hospital bills, she mumbled. Of course. Of course it came down to money. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. So let me get this straight. You wrecked my life, ran off with Bruce, burned every bridge you had, and now that you're out of options, you think I'm just going to open my wallet and bail you out. It's not like that. She snapped, her voice rising. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I'm sick, Mike. I can't work. I don't have anyone else to turn to. Maybe you should have thought about that before you stabbed me in the back, I shot back. Her face crumpled again, but this time I wasn't buying the tears. I was about to tell her to pack her bags and leave when my phone buzzed again. Another text. This time it was a picture. It was Daisy, sitting in a hospital waiting room. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 weeks ago. But she wasn't alone, Bruce was sitting next to her. My head spun. Daisy said Bruce left her months ago, but this photo told a different story. I turned the screen toward her. Care to explain this? Her eyes widened and her mouth opened like she was about to deny it, but then she stopped. Instead, she just stared at the picture, her face pale. That's old, she stammered. 3 weeks isn't old, I said. You said he left months ago. So which is it, Daisy? Did he leave, or are you still running around with him while you're here trying to squeeze money out of me? She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up and started pacing, her hands trembling. It's not what it looks like, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then what is it? I demanded. Because it looks like you've been lying to me from the second you walked through that door. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her expression suddenly fierce. Fine, she said. You want the truth? Bruce didn't leave me. I left him. But not because of the cancer or the money problems. I left because I caught him cheating. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. And you didn't think that was relevant? She threw up her hands. What difference does it make? He's gone, Mike. I don't have anyone else. I didn't come here to lie to you, I came here because I knew you'd understand. Understand what? I said, my voice rising. That you're a serial liar who uses people until they've got nothing left to give? Yeah, Daisy, I understand perfectly. Her face fell, but before I could say anything else, there was a knock at the door. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone and it was late. Daisy looked just as startled as I felt. I opened the door and there he was, Bruce. Standing in my doorway, Bruce looked exactly how I remembered him. Smug, overconfident, and dressed like he walked straight out of a department store catalog. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt crisp, but his expression was anything but friendly. Mike, he said, nodding like we were old friends. Mind if I come in? I didn't answer right away. My first instinct was to slam the door in his face, but curiosity got the better of me. You've got some nerve showing up here, I said, stepping aside just enough to let him in. Daisy gasped when she saw him, her face a mix of shock and guilt. Bruce? What are you doing here? He gave her a cold smile. I could ask you the same thing. Last I checked, you were still my wife. My stomach turned. Wife? Daisy told me they were done. I'm not your wife anymore, Daisy snapped, her voice trembling. I left you. Remember? Bruce laughed bitterly. Yeah, right after you drained our bank account and skipped town. He turned to me, shaking his head. You always were the sucker, Mike. I figured you'd take her in. Watch it, I said, my fists clenching. Bruce held up his hands mockingly. Relax, I'm not here to fight. I just came to get what's mine. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. My money, he said, glaring at Daisy. The money you stole from me, sweetheart. I know you still have some of it. Don't think I won't go to the cops if you don't hand it over. Daisy's face turned white as a sheet. I didn't steal anything, she said weakly. Bruce rolled his eyes. Cut the crap, Daisy. I've got the bank statements. You pulled out 10 grand the week before you left. I looked at her, my jaw tightening. Is that true? She stammered, avoiding my eyes. I needed it for medical bills. Bruce snorted. Medical bills? That's rich, considering you spent most of it on a plane ticket and hotel rooms. At that moment, everything clicked. The lies, the half-truths, the nervous pacing, it all made sense. Daisy hadn't come to me for help. She'd come because she was running from Bruce, from her mess, and probably hoping I'd clean it up for her. I turned to her, my voice icy. You've been lying to me this whole time, haven't you? Mike, it's not what you think, she started, but I cut her off. No, I said firmly. I let you into my home because I thought you were sick and had nowhere else to go. But this is too much. She reached for my arm, tears streaming down her face. Mike, please. I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate. I pulled away, shaking my head. Desperate doesn't give you the right to use people. You've done it to him and now you're trying to do it to me. Bruce chuckled darkly. Welcome to the club, pal. I ignored him and pointed to the door. Get out, Daisy. Both of you. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I was done being her safety net. You don't mean that, she whispered. I do, I said. I don't know how you sleep at night, Daisy, but I'm not going to let you drag me down with you. Bruce smirked and headed for the door, but not before throwing one last jab over his shoulder. Told you she hasn't changed, Mike. Good luck cleaning up after her. I slammed the door behind them, my heart pounding. For the first time in years I felt like I could finally breathe. But as I stood there alone in my house, a new question crept into my mind. What was I supposed to do now? After the door slammed shut, I just stood there staring at it. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, Daisy was gone, but the weight of her betrayal felt like it was still sitting in the room with me. I wanted to be angry, to feel justified in kicking her out, but all I felt was this overwhelming sense of exhaustion. I walked to the couch and sat down, my head in my hands. The texts, the lies, Bruce showing up like some twisted ghost from my past, it was all too much. I thought letting Daisy in might give me closure, but instead, it ripped open wounds I'd spent years trying to heal. After a while, I heard my phone buzz on the coffee table. I almost didn't look, assuming it was another anonymous text. But when I picked it up, I saw a message from my mom. How's Daisy doing? I've been praying for her. I stared at the message for a long time. What could I even say? That she wasn't the sick, regretful woman she'd made herself out to be? That she'd come back not for forgiveness but to clean out my bank account the way she'd done to Bruce? My mom believed in second chances, in seeing the good in people. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Instead, I typed back a simple, "She's gone now. I'll explain later." My phone buzzed again almost immediately. This time it wasn't my mom. It was another message from the unknown number. Good call, Mike. She was only going to drag you down. I threw the phone down, my frustration boiling over. Who was this person and how did they know so much about my life? First the emails, then the photo of Bruce and Daisy at the hospital, and now this? It was like someone was watching my every move, waiting for the right moment to stir the pot. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever it was might know even more. I picked up the phone and texted back. Who is this? How do you know all this stuff? I didn't get an answer right away, so I got up and started pacing. My mind kept replaying everything Daisy had said, every excuse she'd made. Was she really broke? Was she even sick? Or was the cancer just another lie she'd spun to manipulate me? I walked into the guest room and started looking around. Her stuff was still there, a small suitcase, a purse, and a plastic bag filled with prescription bottles. I grabbed the bag and dumped it out on the bed. Most of the bottles had her name on them, but one caught my attention. It was for pain medication, but the name on the label wasn't Daisy's. It was Bruce's. I stared at it, my heart sinking. She must have taken it from him before she left. I don't know why this discovery hit me so hard. It wasn't like I didn't already know she was lying. But seeing the proof, holding it in my hands, made it all so much more real. My phone buzzed again. Another text. She's not as sick as she says she is. Check the dates on those pills. I looked down at the bottle. The prescription was dated almost a year ago. If Daisy had cancer and needed pain meds, why was she carrying around Bruce's year-old prescription? That was it. I'd had enough. I grabbed her suitcase and stuffed everything into it, throwing the pill bottles on top. I wanted her completely out of my life, no loose ends, no lingering messes. But as I zipped up the bag, I spotted something tucked into the side pocket. It was an envelope, thick and crinkled like it had been handled too many times. My name was written on the front in Daisy's handwriting. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a letter. The writing was messy, like she'd been in a rush or didn't care enough to make it neat. As I read it, my stomach twisted into knots. Mike. If you're reading this, it means I've probably messed things up again. I didn't come back to hurt you, I swear. I just didn't know what else to do. I know I don't deserve your help or your kindness, but I hoped you'd give me one last chance to fix things. I really do have cancer, Mike. But it's not as bad as I made it sound. I panicked. I thought if you knew the truth you wouldn't help me. Bruce told me I was on my own and I believed him. I've been so scared. I've made so many mistakes. Please don't hate me. Daisy, asterisk asterisk. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking. So she was sick but not terminal. And she admitted to lying, but only after she got caught. It was like everything she did came with strings attached, always a half-truth, always a manipulation. Before I could even process the letter, there was a knock at the door. Not Bruce this time, this knock was softer, hesitant. When I opened it, I wasn't sure if I was more surprised or angry. It was Daisy, standing there with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a small bag. I forgot some things, she said quietly. I stared at her, not moving. Why are you really here, Daisy? You already got what you wanted, didn't you? She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I didn't. I don't want this to be how it ends between us. I leaned against the doorframe, staring at her. She looked smaller than ever, her shoulders slumped, her eyes avoiding mine. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You don't want this to be how it ends? I repeated. Daisy, it ended years ago. You're the one who decided that. Her lips trembled. I know I hurt you, Mike. I've spent every day regretting it. But I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe if I came back. Came back to what? I interrupted. To use me? To lie to me all over again? Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying it this time. No, I needed to see you. To say I'm sorry for real this time. I crossed my arms. And the money? The lies about Bruce? The fake timeline? Was that all part of your apology too? She flinched, looking down at the ground. I panicked, she said softly. I didn't know how to tell you the truth without you slamming the door in my face. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You've managed to do that anyway. Daisy didn't say anything for a long moment. Then quietly she said, I'll go. I hope someday you can forgive me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I stepped back and shut the door. For the first time in years I felt like I was finally closing it on her for good. After I closed the door I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My chest felt tight, not from anger this time but from the weight of everything that had happened. Daisy was gone for real this time and all I felt was emptiness. The house was eerily quiet. Her suitcase was still sitting on the guest room bed, the letter sticking out of the side pocket like it was mocking me. I stared at it for a moment before walking over and picking it up. I stuffed the letter back into the envelope and threw it into the suitcase. Then I zipped it shut and hauled it to the front door. I wasn't going to keep anything of hers in my house. I texted her, your stuff is on the porch. Come get it. No reply. Fine. I left it out there anyway and locked the door. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying everything she'd said, every tear she'd shed. Was she genuinely sorry, or was this just another act? A part of me wanted to believe she meant it, but the rest of me knew better. Daisy always knew how to twist the truth to get what she wanted. The next morning her suitcase was gone. No note, no goodbye text, just an empty porch. For once it felt like a relief. I thought that would be the end of it. I was ready to move on, to rebuild the piece she'd shattered by showing up. But then, 2 days later I got another text. This one wasn't from Daisy. It was from the unknown number. You did the right thing, Mike. She would have dragged you down. But there's still something you don't know. I stared at the message, my stomach sinking. I didn't want to play this game anymore, but my fingers moved on their own. Who are you? What do you know? The reply came almost instantly. Let's just say I've been watching. Check your mailbox. The message sent a chill down my spine. I didn't want to go, but curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my keys and walked outside. Sure enough, there was an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no address, just my name written in block letters. I opened it right there on the spot. Inside was a single piece of paper with a printed photo. It was Daisy. But not alone. She was sitting at a table in some restaurant, laughing, a glass of wine in her hand. Across from her, smiling just as wide, was Brüs. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 weeks ago. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Daisy and Brüs, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before she showed up on my doorstep, crying about how he'd abandoned her and left her broke. My first thought was that it had to be fake. Someone was messing with me, trying to stir things up. But the longer I stared at the photo, the more I realized it was real. The way Daisy held her wine glass, the way Brüs leaned in like he was telling a joke, it wasn't staged. This was them, in the middle of whatever scheme they'd cooked up together. I walked back inside and dropped the photo on the kitchen table. My hands were shaking, not with fear but with pure, boiling rage. I felt like the world's biggest fool. I couldn't sit still, so I paced the room, replaying every moment since Daisy had come back. The tears, the lies about Brüs, the sob story about being abandoned, none of it was real. She wasn't just lying to me. She was playing me like she always had. I grabbed my phone and texted her, "Care to explain this?" I attached a picture of the photo and hit send. This time she replied almost immediately. "Mike, it's not what you think. I can explain." I didn't bother replying. Instead, I called her. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice shaky. "Mike, please let me explain." "Cut the crap, Daisy," I snapped. "You've got 30 seconds to tell me the truth. The real truth, for once." She hesitated. "It's not what it looks like," she started, but I interrupted her. "It looks like you and Brüs are still together," I said, my voice icy. "So either you've been lying to me from the start, or you're the most confused person I've ever met. Which is it?" There was a long pause on the other end. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost defeated. "We're not together," she said. "But we've been talking. He wanted to fix things and I thought maybe—" I cut her off again. "You thought maybe you'd string him along the same way you're stringing me along? Save it, Daisy. I'm done." "Mike, it's not like that," she said desperately. "I didn't come to you because of Brüs. I came because I had nowhere else to go. I didn't know what to do." "You knew exactly what you were doing," I said coldly. "And I'm done being your safety net. Lose my number, Daisy. For good." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't just anger. It was relief. For the first time in years I felt like I had control again. Daisy was out of my life, and no amount of tears or lies could pull me back in. That evening as I sat on the couch my phone buzzed one last time. It was from the unknown number. "Good job, Mike. You've finally set yourself free." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. After I hung up on Daisy, I fully expected her to try reaching out again. A text, a call, maybe even another teary-eyed visit to my doorstep. But the days passed and there was nothing. No messages, no knocks at the door. Just silence. At first it felt good. Like I could finally breathe without the weight of her lies pressing down on me. But as the quiet stretched on, something else crept in, questions I didn't have answers to. Who sent those texts and the photo? Why had they been watching? And why help me now after all these years? The unknown number hadn't texted again, and part of me was relieved. Whoever they were, they'd done their part. I was free of Daisy, and that should have been enough. But the photo of her and Brüs lingered in the back of my mind. Not just because of what it proved, but because it felt like the final piece of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was trying to solve. I tried to move on. Threw myself into work, spent time with friends, even started going to the gym again. But the questions wouldn't leave me alone. One night, after too many hours of staring at the ceiling, I gave in. I scrolled through my phone until I found the unknown number. Then I typed out a message. "Who are you and why did you send me that photo?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself. To my surprise, the reply came almost instantly. "Just someone who thought you deserved to know the truth." That didn't sit right with me. It was too vague, too convenient. That's not an answer. Why do you care what happens to me? This time the reply took longer. When it came, it wasn't what I expected. Because I know what it's like to be lied to. To be used. Daisy did the same thing to me. My heart skipped a beat. Who are you? I sent back. There was no response. Minutes passed and my stomach churned with frustration. Just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed again. Meet me tomorrow at the diner on Main Street, 3 p.m. I'll explain everything. I stared at the message, my mind racing. This was either the key to finally getting some answers, or another game. I didn't know if I was ready to find out which one it was. The next day, I pulled into the parking lot of the diner, my chest tight with nerves. I didn't know what I was walking into, but the idea of answers, real ones, was too tempting to ignore. I stepped inside, scanning the small room filled with clinking dishes and quiet chatter. A man sitting by the window caught my eye immediately. He looked about my age, late 30s, maybe a little older. His dark hair was neat, but there were lines of exhaustion etched into his face, the kind you don't get from a few bad nights of sleep. He waved me over and I hesitated before walking to the booth. "Mike?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm Eric," he said, offering a handshake. "Thanks for meeting me." I shook his hand, unsure of what to say. "So, you're the one who's been texting me?" He nodded. "I wasn't sure you'd come. But I figured you'd want to know the truth about Daisy." "The whole truth?" My stomach twisted at the mention of her name. "How do you know her?" I asked, though I already had an idea. He leaned back, folding his hands on the table. "We were together. Before Bruce. She and I were engaged." That hit me like a freight train. "Engaged?" "Yeah," he said, his mouth twisting into a bitter smile. "And just like with you, she tore my life apart when she decided I wasn't good enough anymore." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I know how it feels," he said simply. "To be used. Lied to. Daisy has a way of pulling people into her orbit, making you think she's the victim, and then bleeding you dry. I've been watching her do it for years. First to me, then to Bruce. And now, apparently, to you." I felt my fists clench under the table. "So you've been, what? Keeping tabs on her?" He shrugged. "More like keeping tabs on the fallout. When I found out she was back in your life, I knew I had to step in before she could do to you what she did to the rest of us." I shook my head, trying to wrap my mind around this. "What exactly did she do to you?" Eric's face darkened and he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We were together for 4 years. I thought she was the one. She had me convinced we'd spend the rest of our lives together. Then, out of nowhere, she told me she was unhappy. That I wasn't ambitious enough, that I didn't make her feel special anymore. A week later, I found out she was sleeping with some guy from her office." "That sounds familiar," I muttered bitterly. "She didn't just cheat, Mike," Eric continued. "She drained my bank account, maxed out my credit cards, and left me with nothing. By the time I figured out what was going on, she was gone. Moved in with the guy she cheated with. I didn't hear from her again until she reached out years later, asking for help." I stared at him, my anger boiling over. "Let me guess, she needed money." "Bingo," Eric said, his mouth twisting into a grim smile. "She told me she was sick, that she was broke, that she had no one else to turn to. I was stupid enough to believe her. Gave her what little I had left. And then, just like before, she disappeared." I leaned back in my seat, my heart pounding. "She told me the same story," I said quietly. "About being sick. About Bruce leaving her. She even cried on my doorstep." Eric nodded. "It's her MO. She plays the victim, pulls you in, and takes what she needs before moving on to the next target." A wave of nausea rolled over me. I thought I'd hit rock bottom with Daisy's lies, but this was something else. "I thought maybe she'd changed," I said, my voice thick with anger and regret. "That she was really sorry for what she did." "She's not sorry," Eric said firmly. "She's just good at pretending to be." I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd carried the weight of what Daisy had done to me, thinking it was something about me that had driven her away. But now I realized it wasn't about me at all. It was about her. Eric leaned forward again, his expression serious. Listen, Mike. You're not the first person she's done this to, and you won't be the last. But now that you know the truth, you don't have to let her keep dragging you down. Walk away. Cut her out completely. It's the only way you'll ever be free. I nodded slowly, his words sinking in. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see things clearly. Thanks for telling me, I said. Eric stood up and offered his hand again. Good luck, Mike. Don't let her win. I shook his hand, watching as he walked out of the diner. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control back. Daisy was out of my life for good. And now I had the truth to back it up. As Eric walked out of the diner, I sat there, staring into my half-empty coffee cup. His words echoed in my mind, walk away. Cut her out completely. For years, I'd blamed myself for what happened with Daisy. I thought I wasn't enough, that I'd somehow driven her to leave. But hearing Eric's story made me realize something. This wasn't about me. It had never been about me. Daisy was who she was, a manipulator who thrived on using people. And for the first time, I felt like I could finally let go of the guilt and anger I'd carried for so long. I paid my bill and walked out of the diner, feeling lighter than I had in years. The drive home felt surreal, like I was leaving behind more than just the diner. I was leaving behind the part of me that had been tied to Daisy for so long. When I got home, the house felt quieter than usual, but not in a bad way. It wasn't the emptiness of being used or lied to. It was peace. I went to the guest room where Daisy had stayed. It was empty now, just the way it was before she arrived. I stood there for a moment, letting the memories settle before shutting the door. Later that night, as I sat in my workshop sanding a new project, my phone buzzed. For a second I tensed, half expecting another message from Daisy or the unknown number. But it wasn't. It was my mom checking in. Thinking of you, Mike. Hope you're okay. I smiled, texting her back, I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am. The days after Eric's revelations felt strangely quiet. No unexpected knocks at the door, no cryptic texts, no emotional roller coasters. For once, I felt like I had control of my life again. I spent more time in my workshop, focusing on building furniture for a local charity auction. It was satisfying, creating something solid, something that wouldn't break under pressure. One evening, while working on a table, I paused to reflect. Daisy's reappearance had stirred up a lot of old wounds, but it also forced me to confront the truth. I realized that forgiveness didn't mean letting someone back into your life. It meant letting go of the hold they had on you. Daisy was my past, but she didn't have to be my future. As I sanded the table's edge, I found myself thinking about the possibilities ahead. Maybe I'd reopen myself to dating someday. Maybe I'd focus on growing my business. Or maybe for now I'd just enjoy the peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking backward. I was looking forward. And it felt good.